Hi guys.
Hey, hi everyone. Good morning, good evening. My name is Karthik. So I'm going to be presenting this demo session for API actually this time. So let me give a quick introduction about myself, right? So I'm in IT field for close to 10 years now. So in the initial phase, I joined as a testing engineer, manual testing engineer with IBM, and later got interested in automation and switched to automation, right? And worked in automation for close to 4 or 5 years across IBM and CTS. And later I switched to a company called Freshworks, again as a testing engineer. There I got to work with this product-based company, and I got insights about the APIs and how the backend system works and everything. I later got interested in backend development and learned that, and switched internally to development, and joined Amazon later as an SDE2 as a backend engineer again, primarily. My primary interests are in backend systems, APIs, and distributed systems and distributed architecture and so on. So this is a quick summary about myself. So before getting started, right? So I just wanted to know like what the audience or I mean the current participants are actually doing, and their experience in the field. So how many of you are totally like freshers or out of college, or maybe within a year of experience? Maybe any, I mean, people are commenting, or I mean answering, or can comment in the chat actually. So how many of them are like within 1 year experience, or fresh out of college, or something like that? Okay, I hope no one. So how many of you have experience only in manual and not in automation? Okay, as an automation test engineer, 4 years as QA, right? What about the rest of the others? Maybe others also can comment their field and their experience as well. Okay, okay, all right. So many people are from manual background, right? It's okay, no problem. So we will actually get started with the basics only. So this demo session is also going to be the continuation for your the entire batch as well. It's not a separate session as such. So whatever we get started with today, from the subsequent weeks, we'll actually continue that along with whatever we are going to see today. Just give me a minute, actually. So, how many of you have like automation in the sense like there is UA automation, API automation? How many of you have specific knowledge? Or let me put it this way: how many of you have are new to API testing, even though they are familiar with Selenium? Actually? Okay, okay, all right, all right. Fine. Let me. get started, I'll start to share my screen. Let me know if it is visible. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So as and when we progress through the session, right? So if you have any question, I'll be monitoring the chat window. So please post those things in chat window as well. Or if you wanted to respond to anything, also you can post it in the chat window. I'll try to look at those and take the session forward with respect to that, right? So let me kickstart from the basics. It's not going to be, because it's we'll not directly jump into Postman or REST Assured directly without knowing the basics, right? And also there are many people from manual background, so we'll get started with the basics. So what is an API basically? So if we understand how the API functions internally, right, then the other tools, right? Other tools are just for managing those APIs or actually automating those APIs, right? Nothing much, correct? So the understanding of API itself is very crucial to actually get started with the automation itself, correct? So API is application. We all know the full form. Programming interface, right? Let's say I have any application, right? And there is an interface to that application, correct? For example, let's say we are connected via Zoom call, correct? And that Zoom is an interface, correct? It's an application, it's an interface for the user to actually manage the video conferencing that we are actually currently doing. And there are many features associated to it. For example, I can see the list of participants, I can see the chat the data that is updated in the window, all those things, right? So in any web applications, right, or any application for that matter, working across the internet, there has to be some party, two other systems that are connected to achieve some goal, right? For example, in case of let's say in the Zoom, what are the two parties? Maybe one party is a presenter, right, and the other party is actually the receiver. Right? But let's say I am the presenter and the participants here are the receiver, but both are interacting with this application called Zoom, and we are actually the clients of the Zoom application, correct? So when I say client, Zoom, we are actually using Zoom, or let's say we'll put it this way: Zoom team has made an application, and it expects some users of that particular application to be able to use, so that it can actually generate revenue or something based on that thing, correct? So we are the users of the particular application called Zoom, and we are also the clients of that particular company called Zoom. So we are the client, right? And we are interacting with the Zoom application as a presenter, as a receiver, and those kind of roles, right? But to manage all these things, there should be some other thing, right? Some other system, some other process to manage. Let's say I'm presenting, I'm sharing my screen. That information should reach to the participants here. A similar way, if the participant sends out some chat message, that should be able to be received by me and other participants, right? So there has to be some central system to manage all these processes, features, and services, right? Those kind of managing is taken care by the services, the backend services that is written by the Zoom application. The team owns that Zoom, correct? So those end which manages all those things is called servers, correct? Let's see another example. Let's say we are using Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. Recently, it was down worldwide, correct? That is also because of some backend issue and architecture or infrastructure issues might be, correct? So we are the users of Facebook or Instagram, right? So that means we are the, what are we? Client, right? Or let's say we are the users, right? Let's put it this way. We are the users of Facebook. And we are using any, let's say, Android or iOS mobile to access that Facebook. And we can call that application as a client or interface through which we are communicating with the Facebook. We are creating a profile, or we are viewing the news feed, right? And who is responsible for giving the news feed for you? Who is responsible for displaying the sent friends list, or posting some uh, post to the Facebook? Who will do that? Any answers?
Application team.
So, I mean, we actually create the post, but who will serve that data? The backend servers, correct?
Yes.
So the team will actually create the services and host it in the servers, but everything is automated, correct? When we post some data, the data will be actually posted and will be available to our friend circle and will be stored somewhere, right, for the availability. So those kind of processes are managed by the servers. So in a real world internet services, right, where we use the internet, there will be always a client or a user which access to the client, right? And there will be always a server which manages the particular application to do some processes or to manage some features that a particular application is providing. For example, in the case of Facebook or Instagram, we can create post. In Instagram, we can upload the pictures, we can view the other users' pictures, we can accept the friend request or we can reject the friend request. These are the features of the application, correct? And all those features are created and managed by these backend services called servers, right? Through the servers. And what is a client? Client is an application or the interface through which we are actually doing all these processes, correct? So those are the clients, right? So take any application for that matter, we'll always have a client, we'll always have a server, and there will be always a user who is using that client to access the data from the server. So the point to remember is there is a user who is actually using the particular application. There is a client or interface, which is a tool to actually access the data or to create the data in the backend system. And there are servers. They're actually processing the actual information and giving the data back to us, right? Now, what everything this is actually fine, but where is the API coming into picture here? Where does API fits in?
Calling from client to server.
Right?
Between client and server.
Yes, correct. So when I say the communication is established between a client and a server, there should be some protocol or some rules that govern the system, and there should be some means or ways through which this has to be achieved, right? That means or ways is called API. So it is we can call this as a protocol or means or ways to achieve client server communication. So we will see what are those means or ways while we explore the APIs, right? So we cannot just two people communicating is very, very simple and straightforward, right? We see a person or we talk through phone or whatever it is, right? But whereas the two system for it to communicate, it has to be designed in a such a way so that the both systems, the system is what at the end of it, it's a computer, correct? So they have to understand each other and deliver the particular message or the data properly to the end users or the servers. To manage that, it has to be governed by certain protocols or principles or the way it should work, right? Just like that, if we don't have any rules for governing all those things, first of all, it will not be streamlined, it will not be uniform, right? And there will be no security that will be there between the client and participant and the server. For example, let's say no one just like that everyone cannot join this call, right? It is organized by a company called Way to Automation, and from that people are enrolled and coming back to this particular meeting, correct? So there has to be some kind of security, right? People who knows this meeting ID or password will be there. This is one form of doing the way, right? And second form is let's say if I'm using a Facebook application, I wanted to be authorized So the correct data is fed into me. I cannot just go and see the other people's wall, their information is all correct. What information should be served to me should be served to me, correct? So to govern all those data, for which data has to be sent to whom, all decided by the security, privacy, and the way the feature works, right? So those kind of things will be taken care by the API, right? So it is on a high level. We'll just break it down into actually low levels, right? We'll take, let's say, Instagram itself as an example. So now we know we are the users of Instagram. We said we will be the user. And there is this Instagram application itself, which we call as a client. Now, with help of only the application only we'll be able to access Instagram, or is there any other means to access the Instagram? Any answers?
We can use it on web.
Yes, we can use it on web, mobile app, and any other way.
We have API we can connect, I guess.
Yes. If we have yeah.
What is your question?
So we are having Instagram app, right? So that we call as a client. What are the different ways of accessing that Instagram was a question. So we have this web application. Let's say we are. Sorry.
Advertisement also is there on Instagram app.
I didn't get the question properly. Hello. Okay, let me continue. If have any question, please post it in the chat. Yes, you're audible, but the voice is not quite clear. Maybe I missed something or else. I don't know. But if any question, please post it in the chat. I am actively monitoring the chat. So yeah. So we'll continue. So we have web application, we have mobile application, and we have the actual API itself. We'll talk about what is this API. Even this web application, mobile application will have certain code to actually hit this API only to get the things done, like uploading a photo or viewing others' photo and so on and so forth. So maybe these are the different ways through which we can like interact with the Instagram application, right? Now here the client can be, so we have to understand one thing, the client is not a single entity, it can be anything. Okay, so app web is fine. What is an API? So I'll talk about an API very briefly. I'll explain it elaborately very later. API is nothing but an endpoint, or let's say in a simple terms URL, in which we will hit that URL and get the data back. Right? Even if we use the browser, we will actually hit some data and get the data back. Correct? Browser is just a tool to use, like hit this URL. Correct? Let's say. We are actually, if we type google.com, right? And if we go to this, this tool, right? Google web tool, through which we can actually debug or view the application elements, network calls, dev tool. Yes. So let's say I'm actually clearing this. So if we actually hit the URL, what should be actually triggered? Only the google.com URL should be triggered and we should get the result correct. But if we hit this, so many URLs will be triggered. I'll show you. So here I have set it to all, correct? All types of API requests will be actually there, right? See how many URLs are getting triggered. So first URL which got triggered is google.com, right? And we are getting the response. So here, what is a client? Here the client, we can call the client as a browser, correct? Through browser only, this is a Chrome browser, correct? So browser only we are using this, accessing this Google website. But even then, actual URL is getting triggered. I'll show you an example. See, the google.com is getting triggered. We did this action, so this URL getting triggered and some pages loaded. But what about this? Let's say, what about this URL? google.com/client 204 ATYP is equal to, or what about this URL? aps.google.com, or what about this? WAAPA.clients. So we did not trigger this URL, correct? So who triggered this URL? I just typed google.com, but I did not trigger this request. This is a request URL, right?
This is an API.
So who triggered this is, it is actually automatically triggered by the JavaScript that is loaded along with this google.com. See, there are certain JavaScript that are loaded, correct? So this JavaScript will have the functionality of what other elements that I need to load for the application to actually work. For example, let's say I have loaded my Google homepage, and see my display picture is actually here along with my details like Karthik Raja, Google account and everything. But if you load this Google web page in your browser, maybe your display picture will be there. But who actually is responsible for actually creating this display picture? I mean, getting this display picture back and integrating along with the web page. If you see here, there is a URL that is triggered, correct? This is a URL which I didn't trigger. The Google web page itself triggered automatically, right? Google user content. And if you see the preview of this result, this is actually my photo. Whatever you are seeing here is actually coming here as a result, right? Now, who triggered this URL and got this image back and put this image back to this particular area in the web page, right? Who triggered this is actually Google web page trigger. So any application, right? Any application will have three basic components, right? HTML and CSS and JavaScript, right? So with help of these three elements only, any web page can be constructed, correct? Even in your mobile applications, these things are there. Just that we are able to see that very easily through the Chrome dev tool. Will not be able to see that easily. Maybe some tools might be available to see those things, but it's not as easy as seeing via browser with our mobile application. Mobile application might be difficult to see, right? So if you see here, these are the elements of this web page, guys. This is an HTML. This actually represents what has to be triggered. I mean, what type of structure the web page has to be. Like there has to be search bar here. If you see here, there will be an element for that text area, right? Text area represents the entire search bar here. And there has to be some search button or Google has to be loaded here, right? The structure of the web page is decided by the HTML, correct? Structure is defined by the HTML. And what is CSS is responsible for? Any answer?
And the presentation.
Sorry?
It's for the styling and the
Yes,
presentation.
styling, correct. Styling, look, or whatever you wanted to call, right? When they say styling, this area is curved here, right, with a little shadowy effect, or maybe the color that is chosen for the web page, right? Or maybe the alignment to a certain extent. This should be aligned with let's say this should be encircled, not a squarish one. So those kind of style or color related design is actually done by this CSS. And CSS can be actually embedded inside this HTML page, or it can be separate CSS files that can be loaded and used by the web application to actually do the styling, right? So HTML is for structure, CSS is for styling, and what is JavaScript is for?
For validation.
Validation of what?
URLs.
See, validation is maybe a secondary use of a JavaScript, but the primary is functionality, or someone has to, it's a different way of saying dynamic interaction. So what is a function of this web page is actually defined by this JavaScript, right? So what is the function of the Google web page actually?
Searching the stuff.
So if I actually click here, what is displaying here? Already trending searches are displaying. If I wanted to search something, I can do here. And my image is loaded here. Can I also call this as a function? People,
this is
please
a
go on mute. Yeah. So can I call this my image loading here, my name displaying here? Can I call this as a functionality of this website? Can I call like that?
Yes.
Yes, right. So this is also one functionality of a website. It is dynamic, right? It is not. I will see my image. You will see your image. Right? But I'm already authenticated with Google, right? I've already logged in with my Google account. So only it is able to fetch my correct image, right? So when I type google.com, what will actually happen is, if you go to the network tab, load it again. So some
Sorry,
JavaScript.
Karthik, how did you guess this bottom half of the page? I mean,
You can actually right click and if you just
So-
inspect or
Okay.
web
No,
page.
in the right side, we have three dots, right? If we tap on that,
Which one you say?
new Chrome
three
available
dots. In the right side, three dots is there, right? Click on that.
top
No,
of
below.
your
Okay,
picture.
here you say.
Below, yes. Below. Oh, not this one, not this one.
On the
Yeah.
DevTools part. only.
Open the DevTools part.
Mhm.
Within the DevTools, we can have three dots. Yeah, click on that. We can see. We have four different options. First one is we can see only the web page. In the back side, we can see the DevOps tool page. Second option will be right side one. Third option will be bottom one.
Oh, you're saying
like that.
alignment. Okay.
Yes. That is the thing.
Okay, got it.
What was the question actually? I thought how to open the DevTools was the question.
Correct. That was the question, but he said where to get bottom, right, left, like that.
Yeah, how to open DevTools? Actually, you can just go and just click on inspect. You'll get this DevTool and with the different like options here. And also you can actually use Control F12 or Command F12 wherever you are, depending upon the system. Simple ways, just right click and click on inspect.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and also, okay, since we are here, also we can see this styles here, correct? So what are the styles loaded here? So different elements have different IDs and styles associated. We can actually play with this. See, if I just uncheck this style, then the Google goes to the left, right? So like that, we can just play around with this. See, I'm unchecking each and everything, and the alignment of the entire page is getting changed. Right. So style is responsible for doing all these things. HTML is for the basic structure of the web page. Right. Now, if we go to the JavaScript, right. Now, when I load this google.com, the JavaScript is also getting loaded. But who loads this JavaScript? All the HTML element that you see here will actually see the HTML page that is actually loaded here contains some script, correct? And there's a URL for this particular script. So here from this, the JavaScript will be loaded, right? There is a script tag itself for it. So that JavaScript will have some logics to actually fetch the let's say cookie or the access token. Since I have logged in already with my Google account, it will have the browser will have access to this session token or login token. The JavaScript will have logic to fetch the token and hit all these URLs, subsequent URLs that you are seeing here, right? Let's say my image, for example, my image. So hit to this URL, get this image and load it here. So that will be a functionality of this particular JavaScript, right? So who is triggering this web page? Who is triggering all the subsequent other URLs which we did not do? The initial set of URLs will be triggered from the script tag that we actually that is given from the HTML itself, right? And from the script, we'll have that logic, JavaScript logic to actually do all the functionality that is actually needed. And that is responsible for triggering all these APIs and loading all this data here. So since I'm in India, so I'm able to see the trending thing that is currently in India. Maybe if and this is decided based on my location, right? Or IP address or the server that is processing this particular request, right? And if someone is in US, they'll be getting the trending search based upon their location. Again, who is responsible for this functionality? Again, the JavaScript that is there embedded within this web page is responsible for identifying this location and getting the results based on the location. So all these things are taken care by JavaScript. For every data that you see here, right, in the web page, an actual API is being triggered, correct? So we see an example, right? To load my image, an API is being triggered. To get this trending searches, API is being triggered. All these things are done with the help of this application or with the help of this web page that is loaded in the browser, right? So now, what is a client here? Let's take Google as an example now. What is a client here?
Browser.
Yes, we can call the browser as a client. So, but then if browser is a client, what is this google.com? The actual web page you are actually seeing here.
This is the endpoint.
So it is actually a content that is got from Google servers, correct? Can we put it in that way?
Yes.
So this content here is actually HTML content. For example, if you again go and inspect and the network, if you again hit google.com, the first request that is triggered is google.com request, correct? So if we see the preview, we get the structure, actual structure, right? If you see the preview, my image is not loaded here. Google image is not loaded here. And if you click here, no trending search is actually displayed, right? Just a structure. And if you see the actual response, it's actually a HTML document, right? A plain HTML document with some JavaScript inbuilt inside this, right? So this is so when I hit go, now here the browser is the client. And Google web page is the data that is coming as a response from the server. No, okay. Before that, the client, what the client is doing? The client is triggering an URL, correct?
Calling the IP or URL.
URL or IP. In the raw terms, it is IP, or in a very polished terms, it's a URL, right? www dot.
One question, Patrick.
Yeah.
Suppose in the desktop, after starting our laptop, we do
Mhm.
not type anything and we just click on the Google Chrome icon, and
Okay.
then the web page opens, right?
Okay.
Google.com.
Okay.
So in that case, when we click on that icon, that
Mhm.
that that helps fetch the page from the Google server, right?
Not just clicking on the icon. So we have set a home page to be a Google, correct? So
Right,
only
right.
when Chrome is clicked, that home page is actually triggered. Now the browser will know what is our default preference. What is my default preference to load the google.com as my home page. So whenever a particular Chrome instance is launched, right? Chrome application is what? It itself is actually something is coded with help of some coding language only, correct? So there'll be some logic associated with it. So it will try to fetch this information. What is the default browser, default URL information from the preferences that we stored. Again, the preferences are stored in my local computer, correct? So let's say I'm setting some home page to google.com, right? Where will be my preference stored? My preference will be stored in my local computer with inside some folder which this Chrome manages, correct? So it will go and read that information from there, and it will instead of we doing manually clicking the google.com and entering, the browser does that for us. That's the only difference.
Right. So in this case, who would be the first client? Is it like, let us say, when we click a plus tab, new tab, that
Mhm.
tab will act as a client because it is automatically taking our previously put preferences that it should launch a Google new page. So the client would be, can we say the client is a tab or, the shortcut?
No, here, see, client is any application or any tool that helps you access the resources from the server. You can put it in that way. So you cannot just call this single clicking of a tab as a client. It's a functionality provided by that client.
Tab is
Okay.
equivalent to a new window, new browser.
So it is just, yeah.
So ultimately, browser is a client.
Yes, browser is the client. Tab is just a use case. It's a feature inside that client. You can think of like that,
Okay. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
right? Correct. So ultimately, the entire browser here is a client, right? And there are some automated actions that we can do, right? Those are some configurations or settings that we create inside the client. And these are the actions that we can do, the feature that are available in the client that we are actually taking hold of, right? The actual client is the entire Chrome browser itself, right? And why we call this as a client in the first place? Let us understand that first. Why this browser has to be a client?
It is interacting with server.
Yes, it has a power to, or it has a capability to interact with the server, correct? And here, just like that, any other application cannot interact with the server, correct? See, I have one other application installed called a VS Code. Can it go and interact with the server and load a Google web page for me? It is just a note-taking application, correct? Maybe if I install some add-on, might be possible, but generally, VS Code as an application will be able to interact with the server. Is it possible? No, correct. So this is not a client, right? This is just an application. So, and if you just think in the raw terms, Chrome is also an application installed in my computer. VS Code is also an application installed in my computer. But I'm not calling this as a client. I'm calling this as a client because it has a capability to interact with the server and render some content back to us from the server, correct?
Hi, I have a question. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, so you are saying this browser is a client, and whatever we are getting here, it's an end result, right? So www.google.com is my API here.
Correct. So it's you cannot call this google.com is a URL. See, the protocol which is governing this as an API. So in a simple terms, API is something which is comprising of certain components like URL. If you see here, it's not only about the URL here, right? When I trigger this URL, some other information is also getting going along with this particular URL, right? Like what is a request method, right? And what are the request headers, right? Right. I will talk about all these things in a detail, but URL is just not just google.com. It is just all the details along with the URL, which helps us in getting the data from the Google is an API. Here, API, I can, if you wanted to have an example of an API, right, in the context of google.com, API here is a URL, which is in our example is google.com. And a request method, which is a get method, and headers, right? And since it's a get method, it doesn't have any body. And also, let's say it is able to do that via REST architecture, right? So the things which together put together all these components, we call that as an API, right? So it's an interface, which application programming interface. Here the interface is google.com, right? And the API is actually the www.google.com, which is a get API, and with certain headers, which is actually comes under the REST architecture. There are a few architecture, right? Like the SOAP based services, REST based services, or GraphQL based services, right? Like that, this google.com comes under REST-based architecture, which is actually done via this, how this network call goes via HTTP. right? So put together, we call this as an API.
So do we have any API in laptop application as well, like Zoom and other?
See, it's, for example, there is some application which actually interacts with some. For example, I am yet to install Postman. I think I'll install and show it to you. What example can I just a minute?
Like we use many applications like Zoom,
Okay, let's say
WhatsApp.
we have an Apple Maps here, right? This is also an application installed in my computer, right? So let's say some map data is loading here, correct? So can we call this? Okay, one question: can we call this application as a client?
Yes, because it is fetching data from server.
Correct. So it is able to fetch the data from the servers. Which server it is actually?
Google server.
From the Apple servers, right?
Yes, sir.
So it is able to fetch the data, but the application of this particular, I mean, the users of this application is only restricted to the maps, right? So it will, so it is like coded in that way. It is wired in that way. So you cannot just go and get google.com web page here, correct? So, and there is no interface to type in URL here, correct? Is there any interface like browser? No, right? Browser has a interface, URL bar to actually type an URL, right? But whereas Apple Maps doesn't have any anything as such. So now what is an API here in Apple Maps? API is something that information which this particular app application requests to the Apple servers by triggering some URL, right? Along with some context, correct? What is that context? Let's say if I am going to Mumbai and zooming it here. So it should be able to fetch the details around this Mumbai region, correct?
So when we
Now
search here, search map, when we search here, so it will fetch data. Maybe that their API is calling.
So
Can I-
it will send out this data. What data it will send out? This will send out this latitude and longitude information, correct? For this particular area, maybe
Yeah, when
in
we
a
search
particular
here,
area.
search map, maybe Delhi. Search here Delhi, then it will fetch the data from for Delhi area, right?
Yeah, right.
So is
So,
API calling here?
so like API is being called, correct? So now API is not only the URL, correct? So API is also the information that we send along with that URL using a particular protocol, right? That is an API, correct? And what is also an API? See, we are getting a response from the server with the information with respect to news. For example, Red Fort is here, India Gate is here, right? Now, who is processing this API? I'm getting all this information, right? New in the particular data loaded here. Who is processing this API?
Server.
Yeah. Server, correct? Now, server understands these are the key data, and it is getting the data back. And server has to process this request. Server has to understand this URL, understand this endpoint, understand what data is being requested from the particular API call, correct? So those kind of logics will be coded in the server so that it understands, hey, we are actually requesting data from New Delhi, and it is able to read that request, API request that is sent from the client in a proper way so that we are getting a proper data here, correct? Because I'm typing a Delhi, it is not able to understand and giving me some other different result which is not expected, right? Will we use this application? No. So that application or server that is actually sitting back in the service in the backend is able to intercept this request correctly and is able to get the result properly for us. So you can call this as a whole process, this entire thing of getting a URL with a proper request HTTP method or type with the headers, with the information that we wanted to get or put, right? And the server which is able to intercept this particular data and able to respond it to the client.
So
So
can we
this,
get a URL for this, like from where we will get this headers and other information?
Okay. See,
Not here for the app.
I mean, what you want to do here?
Like, let's suppose we have such application to test. So
Okay.
can we use API testing here? Because how will we get this headers and URLs and other information?
So there'll be, so
API.
this is an pure interface related thing, right? So there will be an API that will be triggered in the backend, which will be tested by the Apple team in their services, right? We don't get to know that APIs, correct? Maybe if we know use that APIs here in the browser, maybe we'll know. But in this particular application, there is no way to see what are those APIs getting triggered, correct? And see, at the end of the day, these are just raw information, correct? And map is a different like way of storing things. Every entire globe is divided into box by box with the latitude and longitude information, and there's a specific database to store those information and get all the things related to the particular box, right? The map stores in a different way. Let's not dive deep into that. But what I'm trying to convey is, let's say I'm a developer of this Apple Maps application, right? And how will I test, right? There will be some expected result, correct? If I type New Delhi, it should give me the particular result in this particular latitude longitude box with this correct information, correct? How this is rendered in the UI is not something which we can completely test out in API, right? For example, if there are any road information that is running from east to west or north to south, this is not something which we can directly test it in API. But what we can do is that information will be there. Hey, from this particular latitude longitude to this particular latitude longitude, in this orientation, there is a road running. So there'll be some information like X10, Y20, and like it's a road, or here particular it's an airport. So those kind of information will be in a JSON format, which will be processed by this UI rendering application and is rendered in the form of maps for us, right? So those kind of information is rendering properly or not for any given query can be tested using API, not the entire rendering of the UI itself. So the idea of API testing is, if the data coming from the backend services is actually correct, now 70% of the work is done, right? 30% of the work is actually to render the data back in the form that is usable or will be useful for the particular user interacting with that application, right? Why 70% of the work is done by validating just the data? Any answers?
So fetching the data from the backend side is already done with the Java or any other language in the middleware, and only the representation will comes under our JavaScript through the HTML page, what to be represented on the web page.
Correct. So if that is the end result, but the actual thing is, if we validate the data, if data is coming correct every single time, right, then we can rest assured that the UI is 30% of the thing that which will be actually doing its own thing to actually get this thing done. For example, let's say I'm developing some UI to render this map correctly in my application, right? But what if data itself is wrong? Maybe this New Delhi will be actually displayed in a very different way, which is not even a New Delhi at all. Or maybe we are getting some map of Mumbai instead of this New Delhi, right? Maybe we are actually getting New Delhi, but the data is displayed here, something like this here, right? Because of the wrong latitude and longitude information coming from the backend servers. So when I say 70%, that is 30%, don't take it in literal way. What I'm trying to say is, like, API does the heavy lifting, right? In the modern days, right? If you just validate the data correctly that's coming from the backend, then the rest of the thing is actually the rendering the same data in the front end. The correctness of the data is something which we actually validate by the API, correct? If the data itself is incorrect, what is the use of rendering the incorrect data to the user? So the validity of the data, validation of the data has to be very, very important, right? Not only that, how much speed that data is actually loaded in the application. Is the right data loaded for me when I'm requesting, right? For example, the same thing goes here. If I'm requesting some data, according to my preferences, data should load. If I'm actually going and seeing my Instagram news feed, I should get the feed of my friends, not some random feeds, correct? Or not some feed of another friend. That is a
Right.
security breach, correct?
So who does this validation?
So API testers does this validation.
It's in the background.
So see, we are in a, for example, let's say we are in a testing team of any application, Instagram or Google or Apple.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Right? So I test this application in my local environment, in a testing environment, dev environment, correct? By creating, let's say, I'm a tester in a Apple company, testing this Apple Maps, right? Now, what I'll do, I'll just trigger some random APIs with random queries, search queries, to see and automate it if needed, to see if the right data is rendered each and every time within a particular time, and data is rendered according to my preferences or not, right? So that is what we test, and then deploy that. If everything works fine, if everything is fine, then deploy that code to production for the end users or mass market to consume that API. That is how generally things work, correct? So
Just a question, like in this course, definitely we are going to learn that as well, right?
learn that in the sense, like learn what?
Like to validate the functionality of the API by using the architectures available, as you just discussed, like SOAP
Okay.
and other
So we
architectures.
so
Are we
we will
going to?
take an yes.
Yeah.
So we'll actually go and take an example of an employee application where we can actually create and get employee records, and also primarily we'll deal with something called weather application where we'll be able to get the weather details of any particular city and validate that against some expected results. So that we will do.
So I have a question, Karthik.
Mhm.
It's regarding the validation. Suppose, let us say, for example, I want to know the current locations of a train running from Bangalore to Chennai today.
Okay.
Today is 10th. I want to know this current location of a particular train. Now, if it shows me that train location is somewhere near Kashmir,
Okay.
so, and I don't know, I am newly appointed and I don't know. I just know how to fetch the data. So in that case, how the validation of the data will be done?
So here you mean validation, whether the train is actually in Kashmir or not is the validation?
No, the data that is coming, that is getting fetched is correct or not?
Okay. So here you should not see the correctness in terms of where the train is, right?
Functionality wise, it is okay.
Here you should see the correctness in terms of which application is pushing this train location data, right? For example, there's a moving train, correct? There will be some GPS attached to the particular train so that we know the train's latitude, longitude at any given time. And that application will actually, that is installed in or wherever it is in the train, right? It will know the GPS location every minute and it will push that GPS location to a central server, right? Now, as an API tester, we do not have a hold of the data that is being pushed, correct? But we have a hold of the push data is sent correctly to the customer or not.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So if data itself is pushed wrongly from the system that is sending the data, that is a different scenario we have to handle. But as an API tester, which is serving this location data to the client, what we should ensure whether the data pushed from the particular service, that is service which is actually sending this GPS data, is actually that is the right data which we are sending to the client without any delay. Is what we should.
The functionality is working. Yeah. Got it. Yeah.
So this is an example of actually event driven system. So here the event is the moving train, right? And the data is actually varying with respect to time.
So one more question. In this case, the real server, the backend server will be the Indian Railways, let us say. And I open the Google Chrome and I type the address, the query in the search text in the Google window. So now, which one will be the API?
So which one will be the API? See, let's say I will do this. Let's say I'm typing something. We'll type train itself. And I'm clicking enter, or we'll just type something like 12672 train running status, something like that. Let's say we are clicking this and clicking on enter. Correct. Now there's a search query that is being triggered. Can you see?
Yeah.
So this is the API that I'm talking about, right? Who is triggering the search query again? The JavaScript that is responsible for reading whatever we are typing here, right? Will actually understand this word, tokenize this word. Can you see this query is actually wherever there is space, there is it is replaced by with plus symbol here.
Yeah.
Now it will tokenize this word and send this as a query parameter to this URL. Right? So now this is the API responsible for getting this information. Information like this, right? It's a very raw information. This is actually a web page. We'll not know actually how the data is coming. If you have to go and deep analyze all these APIs to know what different data is coming from different results, actually a URL web page only, right? URL encoded web page.
Right.
So now this data is rendered actually entire web page itself. Now this JavaScript is responsible for reading the response, intercepting this data in whatever format that it comes, right? And then put this in pieces together and hey, display this information here. Hey, this is a Nilgiri Express, and this is where it is currently,
Right.
and all those information. And what is last updated time? 36 minutes ago, on all those information.
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
And the front-end styling, CSS and JavaScript styling is responsible for rendering this information in a useful, like in a box structure like this. So Google chose this design. It can be rendered in any way, right? As a tabular format, as a box format, as a simple text. It is up to the application to render the data in whatever content it chooses to, in the way how it is designed. But the data that is coming from the backend is very raw data. Like information is a raw information. It may be a JSON information, XML information, or HTML information.
Okay, these are the formats in which it is coming, right? JSON and all.
So formats can be many things. It's not only JSON or XML. A format can be a simple text-based file, or let's say an entire HTML page where different contents are loaded by triggering different URLs. And a format can be also an image. Format can be also a JSON. Format can be also a simple CSV file. There are different formats. It's not only a straight away JSON or XML formats. There are many formats through which API can communicate. Format can be a multi-part file through which the video and image can be streamed. Right? There are many formats to it. And format can be actually a PDF also. So it's not only one single JSON format that can come from the API. It can be anything. But in most modern applications, the data that is coming is actually a JSON data that we'll talk about in this course, the coming sessions. So have you noticed any, maybe, so if you go to YouTube and maybe click any data or click any video, right? For example, let's say, just, so if you see here, there'll be continuous APIs that will be triggered actually in the backend. It's a streaming data, correct? See, and this particular thing has an expiry date also, because the data that is coming here should be actually expired in a certain time, right? So there will be continuous stream of data that is actually coming from this particular request, right? Just
Yes,
if you are interested in video streaming and all, just go through this, what APIs are coming and how it is actually rendered and all those things. So it's a raw data, right? Video data. So only we are not able to preview this properly.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, one more
just
question.
have a look at this. We'll discuss all these things in detail.
Karthik, one more question. Just after seeing this web page, just got to know. Now, let us say there are cookies which are stored in our local machines, right? Now, they say that this will help us faster browsing and all those things. So, is there any connection between the APIs and the cookies that are stored in our machines?
Oh yes, see, cookies are also part of, let's say, again, going back to this Google search, right? If you see here, there'll be many cookies that will be triggered as a part of request headers. The cookie here is very huge, right? So cookie here most probably will contain the authentication information and other data like user identification, user session, or any preferences, or any other data that might potentially be used by the Google application or any third-party application. It will read the cookie and it will send this cookie information back to the server. And server has the access to these headers, and it will know where to look for this cookie. It will read the cookie header and it will read this information to authenticate me, to look for the particular key to authenticate me. And if the key is correct, and if I'm authenticated, then then only it will be rendering the personalized content for me. For example, my image. So cookies will be almost always be used by any web application to actually trigger your URL.
Hi Karthik, I have one question. Cookies are basically used in a page like an HTML code for authentication only.
In HTML page for?
Authentication only. What is the use of cookies basically?
See, authentication is like maybe you can call it as a primary functionality of cookie. Other functionalities like to set the preferences. In many web pages you would have seen, right? Allow cookies or set cookie preferences. Have you seen this pop-up? So that means what those applications will do is it will set some preferences in your in your local computer, right? Why the preferences set is, for example, again to target and personalize the content that is rendered for you. Right. Next time you visit that website, that particular website will know, hey, these are your preferences. I should deliver the content based on your preferences, right? Same way how this targeting works. Many people you would have given this example, correct? You search for something, let's say search for some shoes in the internet, and when you go to Amazon or Flipkart, you will see the same shoe ad that is coming for you. How this is done? Managed. This is again managed with the help of cookies. So they'll be having this cookie that is set into your local storage of your browser with some ID associated with you. That ID will have the preferences, your preferences that you are setting in the cookie, right? And with the help of the preferences, they are able to actually target you with the ads and everything. And also many websites use this cookie to actually set the preferences, authenticate you, so that and it also asks, right, what information that you can use, right? Use your location information or your name or email ID. If you allow those informations to be used, it will use those information to actually allow the same application to reuse it again, or for other third-party applications to get the information, reuse it again. Because of this,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Sometimes what happen, like whenever any application is not working, so it is recommended to delete the cookies. So it is because of clearing our local storage of browser.
correct. So usually some information will be some kind of preferences or information, or even huge content like HTML itself will be stored inside the cookie. And let's say some services are updated in the backend, which might not potentially use this cookie, or will use this cookie in a different way. And since the logic itself is changed in the backend, now people will ask us to delete this cookie or do a hard refresh. You see this, right? It will empty cache and hard reload. So if those kind of activities will trigger the preferences stored in our local, and it will load the fresh data coming from the server. So only many times we are asked to actually delete the cookie or do a hard refresh, and then application might work. Because the way that server processes cookie, that logic itself might have changed in the backend.
Okay. So to do hard refresh, we need to click on this reload button and then
click on this click on the dev tools, open this dev tools, and right click here and empty cache and hard reload.
Okay. So this is a hard refresh.
Correct. So this part is clear, right?
Yeah. Can you please show that one more time for the hard reload?
I mean, you just see, if you close this dev tools, if we right click here, all right, nothing happens actually. But if you open this dev tools, right, and then right click here, you can see the options: normal read or hard read, or delete the cache also and do a hard read.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, so these cookies will be sent in the headers from the client to the server, so that server will have the context of what is expected to be returned as a response to the client. Let's say this authentication token cookie is not present in the header. Now server will not send me this icon, right? For example, let's say I'm opening an incognito tab, right? If I'm loading google.com here, so my image is not displayed here, right? Because it's incognito mode, which will not use the present cookie that is stored here, the auth cookie or auth token that is stored in my local, right? Now the server reads the request without that auth cookie, right? And it doesn't know, it realizes, server realizes I'm not authenticated or authorized to access my account. So it the logic is it doesn't fetch any image for the particular account because it doesn't know the context of which image to fetch. So it is redirecting me to the home page with the button to actually sign in, right? So now the response we got is the same web page, but with a slightly altered content. What is the slightly altered content? Asking me to sign into Google, right? So if there is no cookie, these things will actually happen.
So basically, in incognito mode, the cookies are not stored.
Correct.
Cookies data, basically.
Correct. So whatever that is present in the client, many people mistake incognito, right? Server cannot track you. Server can track you, your activities. Still, it is a session, correct? But whatever present in the client data, the local storage will not be used in the incognito mode.
Okay.
That is the only difference. Okay. So now we understood the basics, right? Even though Chrome is a tool, it will still trigger the URL to actually get that data back. So we will not call this URL, we will call this as an API, right? So now we will just say Chrome is a tool or a client, right? Which has an capability to trigger this APIs and get the data back for us, right? And what are those data? Here in the Google example, it's a Google web page or search data. In Apple Maps example, it is map data. Or with respect to any other application or for Instagram, it can be your friends, news feed, or photos. Right?
Oh, sorry. I still couldn't understand if we can do API testing for laptop apps or mobile apps. Is it only for browsers?
See, laptop app or mobile app is still an application which will trigger your API, right? So you don't have to think this as some application which is installed in my computer. Yes, it's installed in my computer, but the heart of the data, that is heart of the matter, that is the data that is rendered in this particular thing, right? This application is not actually coming from my computer itself, correct? It is
Yeah,
actually
it's not because whenever we are searching, it is giving some data, but from where we get the API? Is it, I mean, in case of application, laptop application and mobile application, do we get it from our client or somewhere else? Or
that's all. So here we are getting this Apple Maps data from where? From the Apple service through the APIs that this application is able to trigger. So our job as an API tester is not to test this application, correct? Our job as an API tester is actually test the APIs that are responsible for delivering the content to this application. And that we don't need to do like how we think we don't need to do by like testing, having a laptop and testing, installing that application and then test. It doesn't have to be in that way, correct? Now, let's say I'm working in Apple. I know, see, I am a user of this Apple Maps, right? I don't know what API is being triggered to get this data, right? But as a developer or a tester inside an Apple team which develops this application, right? That team will know what API is being triggered, right?
okay.
No, so that context is the core. That is important, right? So once you know the context of where this API is getting triggered, you can use this Postman or rest assured tool to trigger this API and get the data and test the API part out. Now, what is this part? What is this application part? to just a rendering of the data, correct? Nothing. So this is not actual API itself, correct? Or the application which actually does all the part, correct? This application just triggers that API call, right? And what it does, it renders the data in a image format that we're consuming here, in a map format that we're consuming here. So to test that rendering is coming correctly or not, it's a different testing, correct? But that's not a worry of an API tester. What's an API tester's worry?
Let's forget this map application. Let's talk about this banking application. So we have so many features there. Like
okay.
So in that case, we would not have only one page like this map.
Correct.
We would have multiple pages, right? So in that case, we will get the APIs from our client and then we will test it, right?
So what do you mean getting APIs from the client?
From our customer, like in an I'm talking about like I'm working as a tester, so I'll get all these API from my customer, and then I'll test these APIs, right?
No, why we have to see? Let's say I'm using some banking application like SBI or HDFC or whatever it is, right? Now, how this application works is see, the application is rendering some data, right? And it is able to access your getting you access your account, right? That is fine. That's a personalized content for you. But how this application work is a common functionality or feature, correct? You see, you are given a username and password initially to access this net banking application, right? And through that username and password, you are logged in or authenticated. Now, again, this API call, you are not giving this API. I mean, the customer as a user of HDFC Bank, I'm not giving any API to actually for the HDFC to work with, right? APIs are.
How will we test it as a tester?
Okay, 1 minute. So what we'll do is, let's say we are testing out this authentication API itself, right? Now this username and password is given to you, correct? Now, why it is in the first place given to you? Because it is generated from the system and it's given to you, correct? A temporary username and password, right? And now there will be some database in the backend which will store this username and password against some particular account. Let's say there's an account ID called 123, right? Which has this username and password. This data will be already stored in a database, right? Now, using the API, we are able to access this account information through this username and password with the help of backend services, right? Now in this case, you are not actually giving any API. There's already an API to actually authenticate you and let you access any account, right? For example, if I'm authenticating with username XYZ and password as 123, right? So now the particular username and username will be associated to a particular account, correct? Now the backend server will actually process this username and password coming from the client. It will be actually knowing which account details to fetch you for. Now the account number is 123 here. It will fetch you the details for account number 123 and giving you the bank balance or account name or whatever it is. Now, how we will test out this API? See, to test out this API, again, as I talked about, there should be some data in the database, correct? What are those data? Your account information, your username, your password, which is linked to this account information and stored against some database, for example, relation database, so like MySQL. Now, when I hit this API with this username and password, you should be able to get this information for this account 123. So that is the expectation, correct? That is how you will test the data as well. Let's say if I'm giving some other username, right? For example, let's say ABC, and I'm giving some random password, still is able to, the random password like XXX, right? Still is it able to access this particular data of the ABC, right? Then it is wrong. Then we have to go and raise a bug or report a security issue. Hey, despite whatever like password I'm giving for any username, it's able to fetch some data, right? That is not the right API response that we're expecting, right? So how we will test out an API, there'll be already some data present in the database, and there'll be some expected result out of this logic that comes out of this API, right? So it's a get API with the username and password. What's the expected logic result here? Fetch my username information, which belongs to me only. right? That's the expected result. So whether this API is able to get this particular result correctly or not is one testing. And if we give a wrong information or give information a different user, it should not be able to fetch that information, like a negative testing, negative case. So that is the kind of API testing that we do generally, correct?
Karthik, one question. Let us say with the same example, is it possible that one API may trigger another API?
Yes, there's a possibility, correct? So that all depends upon the internal logic of how the backend services handles. If one API triggers another API, that concept is called webhook. So some actions are actually automatically performed to get you the result. Maybe see here in this example also, I'm triggering google.com and there are other APIs that are triggered along with the google.com as I showed you before. That is also the one API triggering another API, but that is happening in the client end. There will be also scenario happening in the server end where one API will trigger another API. For example, let's say I'm searching for some weather, Mumbai weather, right? Where I'm searching in Google, right? But where the Google is actually getting the result from? It's actually getting,
Meteorological department.
yeah, some services which host this weather information, correct? Here it is actually coming from weather data. It's actually coming from weather.com. If you see that the result, right?
Yeah, weather.com, down, AccuWeather, yeah.
Right. So you got the point, right? So
Yeah.
Google doesn't have the responsibility to actually store this data. Google doesn't have to store this data. It's not the job of Google to store the weather information. So we are hitting Google with this search request, and Google with he'll hit another API, weather.com's API, to actually get this data and display it back for us. So it is also an example of one API hitting another API to actually get the data, but this is done in the server end, not in the client end. So generally, in terms of API, the concepts are clear, right? I will dive deep into what is a request header, what are the cookies, and how it works, and all deeper also in the subsequent sessions. But generally, what is an API is clear, right? API is something which is actually responsible for. It's a tool or protocol or a backend service which is actually responsible for reading the client's request and processing the data and send the response back to the client, right? That is an API. So we open google.com, I can see 12 requests in bottom. So we have to validate only one request or all 12. Actually, we have to validate all 12, right? And that depends upon the, it's not, let's say, a straightforward way of testing, right? There'll be some
Actually, we
tools
are not
to,
able to see if you are opening the google.com because we are only able to see the VS Code thing.
okay. I was talking about some question that actually came in the chat. So, see, there will be multiple URLs triggered, correct? And it is responsibility of us to actually like test out all these APIs, whether all these data is coming properly or not. And most of the content are actually static content. For example, if you go to this JavaScript and all, the logic of this JavaScript is same for all the user, right? I'm also using this web page. Maybe you open Google, you are also using this web page. The JavaScript's logic is same. So every time it doesn't have to be rendered from the Google servers itself by customizing the JavaScript code and all. Doesn't have to be, right? And the CSS styling and any other generic image. For example, this Google itself is image. I'll show you one thing. See, this Google logo itself is an image loaded in a separate API call. Right? Well, okay, one question. Why this Google image has to be loaded in a separate API call? Google is common only, no, for all the user. Why? There's a logic that my logo is loaded in a separate API call. There's a logic to it. But why logo has to be loaded in a separate API call?
Geographical importance depends on location.
Yes.
country.
Have you seen the Google Doodle, right? It depends, right? They can actually change the Google logo by decorating it in a different way. Maybe putting some functionality to it. Have you seen those Google
Yeah.
Doodles?
Yeah, in India, if it is Independence Day, or
Yeah.
in America, Black Friday, something, they'll be changing it.
Correct. So now you got the logic, right? So now let's say there's a Google Doodle event and the image is changed. So you see, and again, our responsibility is to test it or not. Yes, correct.
Our responsibility is only that whatever the Google Doodle API is, whatever the changes we are doing in the Google logo, that should come into the web
Yeah.
page.
Yeah. So that corresponding change should come to the corresponding location. If I'm accessing from India, that independence is someone was talking about, right? That independence doodle only should come to me. If I'm accessing from some other location, maybe that person doesn't need this Google Doodle because it is only with respect to India, correct? So only we have to get that information. Other people doesn't have to get this information. So this kind of testing we have to do. Like API testers, we have to do all these kind of validation. So every API that you see here has to be validated if there are any changes that is actually coming from these APIs. So that is called regression testing, right? Any changes. Generally, they don't do all these micro level because I was talking about this JavaScript, right? JavaScript is actually same for all the logics. If there are any changes to the JavaScript, then they'll go and test this API individually. Otherwise, there'll be some automation running to test the validity of this JavaScript. And if you see here, this JavaScript is actually loaded from my disk cache. It is not even going to server and loading this data. Why? Because JavaScript is something, this logic of this web page is not something that's going to change every day. Maybe they are doing some drastic changes to Google web page, then maybe this logic will change. Otherwise, this will be stored in a cache only. Usually it will be stored in my local, or there'll be something called, let's say, this content delivery network, CDNs. Have you heard anyone? All these static contents. What are those static contents? Images, this JavaScript files, the CSS files, or even some extent to HTML files. All these are called static contents, right? So these doesn't have to be taken from the database and given back to us, or it doesn't vary depending upon the user. These are common contents, right? So these are developed. These are actually served from the caches or CDN. CDN itself is a form of cache, content delivery network, which will cache all these reused data, the data that is not going to change over time. Will cache in a certain server locally, very near to us, and it will be delivered from there.
Sir, one doubt I have. Like, so, sir, we have, as you have shown, there are many APIs which are displaying when you inspected for this Google.com.
Yeah.
So, when we start the testing, what will be the first process? Do we get the contract? Like, do we need to test this much API, or all we need to test in one go? Like, what will be the process?
So there are two things here. Definitely, we'll get a contract. And the two things which I'm talking about is this a new feature addition that we are going to test, or any existing feature regression that we are going to test, right? So let's say there is a new feature coming to any application or Google application or whatever it is, right? And the new application will have a new API, new URL or endpoint, right? And which gives some data as a response. So now it is our responsibility to test that data, whether it's coming correctly or not. This is the new feature, new API, and we have to test it. Agree with me or not? Right. So now that is the data which will go and eventually test and using API. And if we feel to automate it, we'll automate it. Whether data is coming correctly or not, everything is fine. But there is also one other testing. And okay, before that, how we are going to test it, what is the expected data and all is actually will be defined by the API contract. So if there is no API contract, please go ahead and ask for those contracts because without context, what we will go ahead and test. Why this particular API is useful, or for what feature it is going to be that context, and what are the components of that API? What is the structure of that API? Is there any query parameters, or what are the different headers that we wanted to give, what are the different cookie parameters that we wanted to set. If it's a post request, what is a request body type or structure we wanted to put in that request and then send the data. All will be defined in the API contract. Then you have to send this data according to the API contract. And if you don't send this data correctly, then the server might reject your request. The API contract is very, very important. It will be definitely given to you. And the second part is now the feature request came, right? And this should not, and now this feature is working correctly, everything is fine. Now, because of this new feature, it should not go ahead and affect the existing functionality. It should not go ahead and change whatever currently it is available. Like currently already working fine. This change should not affect the other already working components or module in our application. That kind of testing is called regression testing, correct? So for regression testing, either we do it manually, but that's not a preferred way. We would have already automated many APIs, or if it's a UI application, we would have already automated a UI using Selenium. And we run those automations to see the basic functionality, core functionality of this application is not breaking because of the newly introduced feature. That's a regression testing. For that also, we'll do one more round of testing.
So, like, sir, if in case of regression testing or in journal testing, like one data is dependent on another feature, so is it possible for us to we can means parallelly check more than one request, more than one API at a time?
Yes, actually, we can parallelly test. There are tools and libraries to do that. That is not a problem, but we have to scope down what we need to test. Just by introducing some small feature, testing all the APIs in the application doesn't make sense, correct? If some feature is introduced, what kind of APIs or what kind of modules is going to affect, scoped and narrow that down, and then test all those APIs is fine. And doing that parallel is also fine, as long as one API is not dependent on another. Let's say there'll be some situation where API 2 is dependent on API 1 only, then it has to be sequentially executed. For example, you cannot trigger an employee get API without even putting that employee in the database in the first place using post API. Right? Like that, these kind of situations will actually in the real time business use case will come. Definitely it will come where one API depends on another API. And the order of the API execution is important. And based on that, we have to take a call whether to execute that sequentially or parallelly.
Okay.
Karthik, I have a small doubt regarding URLs. What is the difference between when we say a normal URL and a endpoint URL?
Actually, these are confusing terms only. I agree. Even I had so many confusions regarding the same. And if you see here, there is generally no single proper definition, but generally in the industry, what we refer is the entire thing is called URL, right? Right. Generally, entire thing what you see is called URL. And if you actually dissect it, this particular thing is called a domain information. Here, even if you dissect this here, this HTTPS is called protocol. There can be different protocol through which you can access the web application network, right? HTTPS is one protocol, HTTP is one protocol. What are the other protocols? You might know any answer.
Can you tell us the difference between HTTP and HTTPS?
Yeah, we'll come to that. We'll come to that in a short while. HTTPS actually is secured. Actually, you will have some security certificate that you can put in a server, and data between client and server is encrypted, so that other third party in between the client and server cannot access the data. Even if they access, they cannot read the data because it is encrypted. That is HTTP and HTTPS. Usually, most of the application nowadays, the modern day application, does go with HTTPS only. Even if there are an HTTP application, the browser itself will throw the warning data is not secured. So don't give any sensitive information like that. Right? There is a WSS. What is WSS?
Web server security.
Actually, web sockets. WSS is web sockets. SS stands for secure again. HTTP is hypertext transfer protocol. S stands for again secure. Right? FTP is, everyone knows this, I think.
File transfer protocol.
File transfer protocol. Yes. So there will be some certain URLs see, most of the URLs you see is HTTPS or HTTP only, but there will be certain URLs where you can actually access the content using FTP, something like this. Or there will be certain URL where you can access using WSS. So these kind of protocols are possible to access the data. All right. Now, in a URL, this is called protocol. This is called domain information, right? Where this will be eventually resolved to a particular IP address using DNS resolution, right? And the IP and the resolution internet network will know which server to hit to get the data based on the IP that is coming after the resolution, right? Google.com will have an IP address, right? Everyone knows that, right? And this particular part is called an endpoint. This endpoint is something which actually takes care of what data actually you should get depending upon the endpoint that is actually triggered. See, the google.com is same, right? Google.com is same. Here we are saying google.com/js. That means the server which processing this request will understand I am actually requesting for some JavaScript content, correct? And the path of the JavaScript is this one, correct? So the entire this thing is called an endpoint. So endpoint decides which API call to trigger in the backend and what kind of data needs to be served. And for example, there's one more endpoint here. If you see, if I'm actually searching something here, right, in the Google, something, right, there'll be an API call that is triggered, right? Here the endpoint is what? I'll copy this and put it here. Here the endpoint is what? Here the endpoint is this one, right? Here the endpoint is search. Correct?
Domain.
See, both the cases domain is the same, correct? The request will go to the same server, correct? But inside the server, it will hit a different API because the endpoint is different. Right? Right. And because it is processed by a different API, the result we are getting is also different.
Right.
So that is how generally API works. We will see, I have a real-time application also.
So, Karthik, sorry, can we say that Indian Railways is a domain and looking for a particular train is an endpoint?
Depends upon how that API is designed, right? Let's say if I'm searching for, let's say there's a website called indianrailways.com, let's say we assume. And if we wanted to search for some train by giving the train information in the as an endpoint, let's say 12672 train. And if it works, yes, this 12672 our train number becomes the endpoint, right? Whereas, let's say there's an endpoint called search, okay? And we are giving this train information as a query parameter, like train number is equal to 12672. That is also possible, right?
Yes.
And there is another possibility that we are actually sending this as a post request, right? And in the request body, we are giving the train information, right? As a JSON, train number 12672. That is also possible, correct?
Yeah.
So it totally depends upon how the API is designed in the backend. Depending upon that, we'll have to send this API request. And someone was actually talking about this contract, right? So that contract also defines how the API is actually designed, right? Whether we wanted to send, let's say there's a contract for this Indian Railways, right? Whether we wanted to send this railway information as an endpoint, as a query parameter, as a request body, right? We will not know initially, but reading that API contract, we will know how to send that request. That's why contracts are important.
But Karthik, you mentioned that this Indian Railways search and query parameter we pass 12672 in a post request. So we'll get the data of that train. But post will, as far I know, post will only create the data of that train, basically the custom, whatever the request we are sending in post, we will that data will get created in the server.
Yes, you are correct. But it's just a convention, okay, not a enforcement, right? You have to understand the difference. See, generally what understand we have, we'll have like, let's say there is a get API, we will only get the data. There is a post API, it will only create a data in the server, it will not get any data back. But it is not the case, right? Let's say there is some API, right, where you wanted to search some train based on some criteria. Okay, let's say there's a you wanted to search some train which runs from Goa to, let's say, Vishakhapatnam, let's say, for example, from Goa to Vizag, and you wanted to search also, like you don't wanted to give too much cost, you just wanted to search some train ticket availability in a general quota between price range of, let's say, 200 to 600. Let's say there's a price range key from 200 to 600. And you also enforcing one more criteria called date. In which date I wanted to travel? Date, right? Let's say 11 March 2024, right? I'm just giving a small example. So if you wanted to search something and there are so many criteria that you wanted to filter out, you might have seen this application where you want to search for aeroplanes based upon different price range or criteria, or even a simple example of Flipkart, right? I'll show you. Let's say if I'm going to Flipkart, right? I'm searching for some mobiles, right? Where is that filter? Okay, let me put Amazon. Let's say search for, yeah. So yeah, there are filters, right? I want to search for OnePlus as well as Apple, and okay, let's say Redmi, and as well as it should be rating should be this much, right? And price range between 5,000 and 10,000, right? And the discount should be more than 10% off. So this filter criteria can change over time depending upon the business use case. And also the filter criteria will be different for different products. Yeah, just because we are talking about mobile, the brand name is OnePlus and Redmi. If you are talking about some other equipment, the brand name might be different, right? So like this, if we wanted to send out so many criterias for a search query to work, do you think sending it in a GET request will be a better idea? Do you think?
So we will send a payload in this case in a post request.
Actually, see, I'll give you an example. Actually, this is sending it in a GET request, right? This is actually sending it as a query parameter. Okay. But as if you see here, the Redmi and everything is there here. But there is a limit to how much like size that URL is, correct? You know that limit, right? 2000, I think, 2000 characters. But in real world applications, in most of the which I have worked, if there are any such criteria, query criteria that you want to present, generally they won't send it in the URL. Here, it is sending it in URL, it is fine, right? But generally they won't send it in URL. They will send out in the post request as a request body. That makes sense, correct? Because in the request payload, we can send out so many such criteria as a payload, correct? And I was talking about as an API which actually gets this data and process this data, correct? And that logic is something which we write. Right? Now there is a post method, and that post method will be triggered to a particular API in the backend server, and that API is what? Just a, let's say if that is written in Java, it's just a Java method with some logic associated within it. Correct? What if that logic is actually to get the data from the database based on this criteria and return it back to the server instead of creating some data in the database? Logic can be like that, correct? So post doesn't necessarily means you are creating some data in the backend. It's just a convention. It's just a good idea to actually do that, because generally across the board, teams and people understand, hey, post means we are creating something. But post API can also be used to get the data back from the server. Post can be acting as a API which can also get the data from the backend servers.
That I understood. It is a convention, but in post we are sending some payload.
Okay.
So
I'm
payload.
sorry, Karthik. I'm sorry to interrupt, Karthik, but I don't think this is kind of basic things we are discussing. We are going into a bit complex, and I really don't understand what is get, what is post. And if this class is for somebody who knows already post, then I think I should be out of this.
Hey, see, no offense. See, we'll just take it slow by slow. Just because the question came, I had to address, and we
Right.
are not
No, I
going
get
to
it.
jump into complex topic right away. Take it slowly, Amrish. I'm also going. I think I'm starting from basics only, if I'm not wrong, and I'm
Right,
trying to
right.
address people's query. And I think it's
I
fair
thought
to
we are
actually.
moving in a different direction, so that's why I interrupted. No problem.
I mean, it's fair to like answer everyone's query, right? And doesn't mean that I'm directly going to some complex topic and jump right away, right? It's just a first session demo session, and it's fair to
Okay.
actually answers everyone's queries. What I think.
Okay. Because I don't, I mean, I'm not getting right what exactly this payload and all those stuff is out of going top of my head. So that's the reason.
Understood, and I'm going to totally talk about this. What is a get? What is a post? What's a payload? Everything in detail in the upcoming sessions. No worries. We are not directly jumping ship and going through some complex topic. Just because the question came, we are just addressing it. That's
Okay. Sure, no issues.
Someone had some question.
No worries, you can leave my question and please go ahead. But what are the basics? With the basics only.
You can ping me separately, Anshika, right? You ping me separately. I'll actually.
Yeah, no worries.
And I request audience to also not actually call out or take things for granted, because I did not even show the syllabus actually, and yeah, we'll discuss the syllabus first. So we will take it one by one, as I said previously, right? We'll start from the basic, and I have to address everyone's queries as well, and we'll take it one step at a time, and we'll not jump ship as well. But at the same time, I need to address people's queries and concerns at the time as well. Don't have to call those things explicitly or take it in a different way. Just a request. Right. Okay, let's discuss the syllabus, right? So far I was talking about this introduction to API and how an API works and all those things, right? And we'll talk about an API workflow. We'll then still go over like what is actually happening in the server and how it is actually processing the requests, what are the databases, and how this data is got from the databases. We'll talk about API workflow in a very complete detailed manner, right? And we'll talk about the REST framework. What is REST protocol, how it works, what are the components of REST, why it is designed, and all those things. And as Amaresh asked, right, we'll talk about the HTTP methods very detailedly with the proper examples and how it is actually working, what are the conventions and everything, right? So once this basics of API is actually clear and what are the different API methods and everything is clear, then we will actually go and use these API methods inside the Postman after the Postman's introduction. Right, so we'll see the complete detail about what's a Postman, why the Postman is actually used, and how we can leverage different uses and features of a Postman. Right, and we'll see all those things. And there are features, important features like scripting, where we can automate something inside the Postman, right? And there's also a tool called Newman, where we can actually use the Postman in a command line format. We'll discuss about those things. Right. Post that, we will actually go into the rest assured part. So what is rest assured? Rest assured is nothing but a Java library to automate your API, right? What is rest assured, and what are the its syntax and general examples and use cases? And we'll implement all those methods, whatever we are talking, get, post, put, delete, everything using rest assured with some examples. We'll talk about what is serialization, deserialization process, and POJO classes example, how to use the Jackson framework to achieve serialization, deserialization, and other benefits of using Jackson library, and how to parse the response or assert and everything using rest assured. So once the rest assured is clear, then you will jump into how to create an entire API automation framework using Cucumber. For that, we need to learn Cucumber first, right? So we'll see what's Cucumber, what's BDD and its detailed analysis, and how to like get this framework work along with the rest assured, right, library to create a framework, and integrating the rest assured and testing along with it, right, and creating a small extent reports framework to reporting, and creating entire framework to work with any kind of business application for our use case. So this will be the entire syllabus, and this will run for the coming 6 to 7 weeks, right? And we'll try to cover all the basics. Authentication, authorization, everything we'll talk about in the subsequent. I mean, taking one step at a time is good, I think, right? Because many people are there from the basic level itself. We'll talk about all these things one by one, and I'll also send my WhatsApp number here. Please, if everyone has any questions or queries or doubts with respect to whatever we saw today, or with respect to syllabus or anything, please ping me in this WhatsApp number. I have posted this number here. Right. I'll try to address those things individually as well. So what we'll do is we'll wrap up this demo session for now, and I'll like to address any questions or queries you have about this content or syllabus or whatever we discussed today. Anything?
The session is very good, sir. The session which you have taken is very good. Like the syllabus or the way you are teaching is very awesome. So,
So the API, the Postman using, once it is completed, will be able to do an end-to-end, say the tester by using this?
Yes, you'll be able to. So all the basic concepts and the how to do that end-to-end idea you will get with respect to the weather application and the that employee application that I was talking about, right? With that knowledge, you'll be able to apply that into the real world things that you get into your company or business, whatever it is.
Do we also require Java on understanding?
Yes, actually, Java little knowledge is actually necessary, needed to when we get started with the rest assured. So with respect to Java, whatever is needed for the rest assured, I will actually take that into thing in the syllabus. But the core Java as such, the OOPS concept is something which I will not touch. We'll actually just touch whatever is required for rest assured or Cucumber. That part we'll touch, but it's good to have a Java knowledge actually.
So this API testing, is that that is included in the CI/CD, or so we can integrate it?
CI/CD, yes, we can actually, we will see an example with respect to Jenkins, but CI/CD is again totally into integration deployment pipeline. I'll touch upon CI/CD, Git and everything, but not in a detailed manner, but with respect to whatever is needed for API testing. We'll see Jenkins example of how we can deploy this job into Jenkins and make this as a job that runs automatically. And with help of that, we'll see an examples of how we can how in the real world people uses that to actually deploy the application to production.
Okay, thank you.
It was very nice session, Karthik. So we would be having regular sessions starting next Saturday onwards?
Correct. Next Saturday onwards. So it should be 16th, if I'm not wrong, 16. And Saturday, Sunday, 6 to 8 p.m. IST.
Okay. Same time. Okay. Great. Thank you so much, Karthik.
So entire course is going to finish it within 2 months?
Yeah, max within the coming 7 weeks.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for joining. We'll wrap up the session and ping my number. So please do ping me personally for any other questions. Okay. I'll stop the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you, Karthik. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.